Hello everyone, back to the 6th Autumn 2019 Analogues update from GWV.com. So we've done 5 updates so far in terms of Autumn Analogues, as well as 1 seasonal model roundup. This is all building up to the autumn forecast, which we are going to release at GWV on the last day of August. We announced this exclusively in last week's Analogues update. So the 31st of August will be the day that we release the GWV.com autumn forecast. That's a Saturday. Quite unusual for us to do that on a Saturday. The reason that we chose that date is that the next day, September the 1st, will be the first day of the winter update. So it's a funny calendar this year, and it has made things a little bit complicated. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to release the autumn forecast on the last day of August. Well, this 6th Analogues update is going to have a look at the central England temperature for June. It follows on from last week when we dealt with June precipitation. This week we're going to deal with the June CET, and I'll go on that for you very shortly. Just to say that coming up later on, we're going to have GWV's Sunday Roundup. So that'll be your usual Sunday afternoon eclectic mix of this and that. And that will be coming up for you around or just after lunchtime. This video could be quite a long video as usual with the long range updates, so if you can't watch it all in one go, don't worry, it will be placed on the autumn updates and forecast page. There'll be a written summary going over everything that we discuss in the video, and I'll get that up for you sometime this evening. It's usually around 7 or 8 o'clock. Big thank you to James Acriel, our Analogues guru, for sending through the Analogues again this week. We couldn't do the Analogues update without James' input, so big thank you to James for doing that. At the end of the video, I'll talk a little bit about what's happening next week and in the following week. So that'll be at the end of the video. Right, let's get on with it then. So we're going to start off, as I say, having a look at the central England temperature for this update. And the June CET for this year came out at 14.2. There it is, which was almost bang on average, really, almost bang on the 30-year temperature average, just 0.1 of a degree above average. So that makes it quite complicated coming up with our CET range for these analogues. The CET range is going to be from 14.1 to 14.3. So we're going to look at past years. I had a June CET of 14.1 to 14.3. I'm going to have a look at the autumns that followed. So we begin with autumn 1851. So again, the June CET range, central temperature range, is 14.1 to 14.3. This places June 2019 slap bang in the middle of that quite narrow range, it has to be said. This is how the autumn looks, but followed that June of 1851. So the autumn of 1851 has above average heights over and to the north of the country, with below average heights to our south and southeast. And so you would expect to be putting in a northeasterly or easterly wind with that. A relatively dry autumn, despite the below average heights sitting to our south, I would have thought. High pressure is up to the north and the west of the country. So the Atlantic is blocked off. It wouldn't be overly wet, but probably, especially later on, quite cold. Then we're into the autumn of 1853, and these analogues, I have to say, from the 1850s do look quite odd. And it's due purely, I think, to how long ago it is. So when we come to do the all years combined charts at the end, we do actually exclude these years from the 1850s. But this one looks like it has a Scandinavian high sitting up to our north, with below average heights to the south. Again, probably quite easterly with this autumn. Again, probably not overly wet because we're not bringing in that classic sort of west-southwesterly. In fact, we do have high pressure up to our northeast, but you would expect this to be rather a coolish autumn, especially again late on. It's a transitional season, of course, autumn. So early on, easterlies in September are going to be quite warm, but by November, easterlies can be quite cold. Big change for the autumn of 1867, again following a June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3. This one is an anticyclonic signal. It has above average heights, high pressure just out to the west and also to the north of us. So just a very anticyclonic looking autumn this time. So you'd expect the jet stream to be pushing off up there. Probably quite a warmish autumn too, and relatively dry with that area of high pressure centred almost over the top of the UK. 1872 comes up next. For this particular batch of analogues, we do have quite a lot of analogues from the 1800s, interestingly. So we've got the autumn of 1872 next, again with above average height sitting to our north, this time further northwest, and this is much more unsettled. It has a trough of below average heights almost, or it is centred over the top of the UK, and so this is a very unsettled signal, and with quite a strong northern blocking signal to our north, you could envisage a fairly coldish autumn there as well, probably cold and wet for the autumn of 1872. We skip on 1 year to 1873, and this is what we find. Again, this is following a June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3, placing June 2019 slap bang in the middle. This autumn has below average heights over the UK and much of northern and western Europe, and then it has a blocking area of high pressure to the south of Greenland and going up to Greenland. Again, this is quite an unsettled autumn, but also quite a cold one. This is a colder autumn potentially than the previous one. Real dip within the 500 millibar flow, and with that area of high pressure, the mid-Atlantic ridge going up to Greenland, you could expect quite a cold and or maybe very cold and unsettled autumn in 1873. 1884 is our next autumn. Look at this one. Again, we've got that mid-Atlantic ridge going on, an area of high pressure through the mid-Atlantic and going up to Greenland, with the below average height sitting to the south of us around there. Again, we're pulling in the wind from a northerly direction. I wouldn't have thought it's over there. In fact, it could be quite a dry autumn, this one, with the ridge blocking off the Atlantic. The low pressure is being diverted away to our south, but you would expect, again, quite a coldish autumn with that, with the wind generally coming in from the north. Then we've got 1906, the autumn of 1906, places above average heights, high pressure over Scandinavia, and we're bringing in more of an easterly flow. This is an interesting autumn. It has a very, very hot spell at the beginning of September, reaches 35 degrees Celsius, can you believe, on the first day of September 1906, but it does become progressively colder as the autumn goes along. Autumn 1908 next, this one again with an area of above average heights just to our northeast, so very similar really, these two autumns, 1906 and 1908. This one again is bringing the wind from an easterly type direction. A cold winter for the winter of 1908-1909, possibly setting up the pattern for that cold winter in the autumn of 1908 with the high pressure developing close to Scandinavia. Our next autumn, following a June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3, is the autumn of 1913. This one is an unsettled autumn with below average heights to our west, above average heights tending to be to our east. Relatively mild with this autumn, in fact quite warm, the winds coming up from a south-southwesterly direction, but it is unsettled. Low pressure to the west-southwest is throwing up rain bands. So warm but wet in the autumn of 1913. Autumn 1919 is the complete opposite in terms of temperature. It's a much colder autumn. It has above average heights, blocking area of high pressure to the west, northwest of the country, below average heights over to the east of the country, and again we're bringing in wind from the northeast. This is an interesting autumn because it starts very warm in early September 1919, but by the end of September 1919, there was actually some snow in the north, can you believe? And the autumn overall became very cold in 1919. Very, very interesting autumn indeed, cold and unsettled overall. Quite a long gap then through to 1932. So the next time we had a June with a CET range of 14.1 to 14.3 was in 1932. This one is a rather cool and unsettled autumn too, with the below average heights to the east and the northeast. The above average heights pulled out into the middle of the Atlantic, and so doing something like that with the flow and with the jet stream. Again, you would expect quite a lot of northerly influences there, probably not overly wet because the Atlantic is blocked off, but it looks rather on the coldest side, you have to say. Then we go through to the autumn of 1937. This one has an anticyclonic signal. So it has an area of above average heights to the west and extending through the UK and going to our east as well, below average heights to the south. So just a rather quiet, sort of benign autumn, I think, in 1937. Not a huge amount going on weather-wise during that autumn. Very quiet, and probably not overly cold autumn in the autumn of 1937. Then we're into the autumn of 1939, the beginning of Second World War, of course. And we find that the autumn of 1939 has a blocking scene. It has an area of above average height centred around Iceland, with below average heights to our south. Again, the Atlantic is blocked off, so this appears to be quite a dry autumn, and it's preceding a very cold winter. So again, we possibly have that idea that the pattern of the really cold, severe winter of 1939-1940, that pattern is possibly just starting to get going in the autumn of 1939. Relatively cool and dry in that autumn, although it does have, I think, a very mild November. Quite a long gap again through to 1958. So from 1939, the next time you had a June CET range of 14.1 to 14.3 was 1958. This one again has quite an anticyclonic signal. Maybe high pressure is the trend with this particular analogues package. We'll find out at the end when we bring it all together. So this one with above average heights to our northeast again, and just bringing in easterly winds. A relatively quiet autumn. It has a wet September in 1958, and then it settles down and turns pretty quiet through the rest of the autumn. 1958 gets quite cold, I think, again by the time we get through to November 58. And then a really long gap, bizarrely long, to 1995. So the last time, or the next time we have a June with a CET range of 14.1 to 14.3 from 1958 is decades and decades into the future, or further on. It's the autumn of 1995. This one with above average heights sitting out to the north and northwest of us. Let's change the colour. Below average heights to our south, around there. So a pretty quiet autumn. It has a wet September, then October turns very dry and really warm as well in 1995. And then November is relatively mild again, but also much more unsettled. So it's a bit of a strange autumn, really. I think most unusual factor with the autumn 1995 is actually the wet September following a hot summer, and leads to another really warm and dry month in October of 1995. So a bit strange how you get that wet September in the middle of a hot and dry summer and a really warm and dry October. But anyway, that's how the autumn of 1995 looks. And then we go through to 1997. So after that long gap from 1958 to 1995, we just have a gap of 1 year from 1995 to 1997. And this is how the autumn of 1997 is looking. Again, it's quite an anticyclonic autumn with above average heights sitting up to our north and into the UK, below average heights to our southwest, and also to our east. Again, relatively dry, relatively quiet autumn with this one. It's dry and warm in September. October is pretty dry as well. Starts warm, gets cold late on. And then November 1997 turns really wet, but is a mild month. And then 1998 showing up. So no years with a June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3 in the 1960s, 1970s or 1980s. And then we get 3 of them turning up in the 1990s, funnily enough. So our next autumn is the autumn of 1998. This one with below average heights over to the east of the country, above average heights to our west, and also blocking up over the North Pole into Greenland. So quite an unsettled and eventually relatively cool autumn with this one. We have a lot of wet weather during the autumn of 1998. Hardly a surprise with that big trough of below average height centred over the UK and much of Northern Europe. But it does also get a little bit colder by the time we get through to November 1998. October 98 is a very wet month. And then finally, the last time we had a June with a CET range of 14.1 to 14.3 was actually 2001. And the autumn of 2001 looks like this. Again, it's an anticyclonic signal with above average heights out to our west, bringing the flow rather like that. So this one, again, lots of high pressure influences, and it's a funny autumn because it has quite a cool and relatively changeable September. Then it goes very, very warm in October. For a long time, October 2001 was the warmest October on record. I think it's been beaten recently, but for a long time, October 2001 was the warmest on record. And then November actually goes quite cold in 2001, but it's pretty dry month too. So a lot of variation between these autumn months, which will become apparent now when we bring it all together. So bringing all of that together, this is how all of these Septembers combined are looking when we have a June CET range of 14.1 to 14.3. And interestingly, it's not all that dissimilar to the Septembers with the precipitation analogues that we looked at last week. So it has an area of above average heights on average. There will be years, of course, that deviate from this, but on average, it tends to have an area of above average heights in September following this June CT range out to the northwest of the country, and it'll have below average heights over to the south of the country. And so that will leave us with quite a cool and quite a changeable looking month for September. October looks like that. It's quite similar, actually. It has the area of above average heights kind of like out to the west-northwest of us again, although it's a little bit centred more towards the middle part of the Atlantic, so a little bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge perhaps suggested there. But it has the area of above average heights to the west-northwest, and then it has the below average heights kind of like to the south and southwest of us. So again, probably not an overly wet month because the Atlantic is blocked up. We're not bringing in that classic southwest to northeast type flow. Reasonable amount of dry weather you would have thought, but probably quite cool again. Perhaps this is a cool autumn signal following these June CTs. And then finally, in terms of the individual months, this is how all Novembers combined are looking following a June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3. This time we have high pressure taking over really, above average heights centering to our northwest, below average heights to the south. So a relatively quiet, relatively settled signal for the Novembers. On average, probably quite a cold signal though, probably bringing in the wind from a north-northeast direction. But remember, there will be years within that are deviating, so you will actually get some very mild Novembers within that. For example, we've got 1939, that was a very mild November, I think. So in terms of temperatures, could go either way. It depends on the exact placement of that ridge. But a relatively high pressure, relatively dry, fine November, albeit temperatures could be variable. Finally, bringing all of that together, this is how all of the autumns combined are looking when we have this June CT range of 14.1 to 14.3. Overall, it is an anticyclonic signal, but the high pressure tends to be out to the northwest of us. So it tends to be kind of like a mid-Atlantic ridge, possibly going up towards, or hinting at becoming a northern blocking feature, going up towards Iceland. Anyway, not quite getting up to Greenland and up to the North Pole. So it's more of a mid-Atlantic ridge type pattern, with below average heights tending to be more to the south. So obviously much more unsettled to the south of us. Relatively settled autumns, therefore. You would have thought with these relatively settled, and temperatures variable, very greatly depending on where that area of high pressure is sitting. At times that area of high pressure for these autumns could be to our east. If so, relatively mild or even quite warm autumns are possible here. But if that high pressure is out to the northwest, then potentially a colder signal for these autumns. So it depends greatly on where the high pressure is sitting. But overall, quite a high pressure anticyclonic signal for these autumns, and therefore you would have thought relatively dry. So that's it for your 6th autumn 2019 analogues update. I think we've pretty much exhausted all of the June data. I was talking last week about potentially bringing you some pattern matching, but I haven't had time to do that. We may get time to do that later on, but I'm not sure if we will or not. But I think otherwise we have pretty much exhausted the June data now. Now I'm going to say that next week we're going to be taking a little bit of a break with the autumn updates. Let me just stick myself up and tell you that next week we're going to be taking just a little bit of a break with the autumn update. So the reason for that is that James, our Analogues guru, Mr. James Ackroll, is going to be doing something really top secret for the first winter update. So we're in July, but we're already thinking about winter updates, and James isn't going to have time to do that, to do some analogues for the first winter update, but I've asked him to do, and to do autumn updates as well. So the upshot is the autumn updates will take a break next week while James gets to work on those analogues for the first winter update. Be very interesting. I won't say any more about it, but you'll see the fruits of James's work in the first winter update that will, as I said at the beginning of the video, be released on the first day of September. So the autumn analogues, the 7th autumn analogues update will be back in 2 weeks' time. It will return 2 weeks today. And then it'll take a break the following week, because the 4th of August we're going to do Solar Sunday. We're going to get one last Solar Sunday in for you in 2 weeks' time. That's 3 weeks' time, isn't it? It'll all make sense as we go along, but the upshot is no autumn analogues next week. We're taking a break while James does some work on the first winter update, and we're going to be back with the 7th autumn 2019 analogues update in 2 weeks' time. After that, the following week will be Solar Sunday. And of course, the GWV.com autumn 2019 forecast has been a really long day, I have to say, and it is getting quite warm in GWV's towers once again. So I'm going to wrap this up very shortly. But the final and official GWV's autumn forecast will be released on the 31st of August, the final day of the month. Right, so that's it. This video will be placed on the autumn updates and forecast page, and there'll be a written summary going over everything that we discussed in the video. I'll get that up for you around 7 or 8 o'clock this evening. Before then, we've got GWV's study roundup. That will be released around lunchtime, but at 23 minutes, bit of a short one, 23 minutes. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.